will be joined by a few of my colleagues who are helping us out. Margaret Donnan, who is our Youth Education Associate, and Casey Withers, who is our Producer Associate, and Mike Rechlin, who will be our speaker this evening. Dr. Mike Rechlin, who is also known affectionately as Maple Mike, is working on getting his presentation pulled up. So let's give him a moment while he is doing that, and then we will get started.
All right, I think we are ready to roll here. Okay.
Okay. Just a friendly reminder, the chat box and the Q&A are open. So if you have any questions or comments during Mike's presentation, please feel free to utilize that and we will make sure that those are fielded to Mike.
All right, I'm going to share my screen and see if this in fact happens like it's supposed to. And right now, Lindsay, I don't have, there it is. Okay. I'm going to share the screen and see if we can pop this guy up. All right. If it is all working the way it should be, you should be looking at a kind of a cover slide to this presentation. And
yes,
assuming everything's gonna, we do. Good, good, good. All right, so let me just give you a little bit of background. I have been at Future Generations working on the Appalachian program for 14 years now. And my focus with the program, although I first came to Future Generations University to work on the graduate school, okay, I moved from there on into the Appalachian program and have been working with maple producers throughout Central Appalachia. We'd like to say West Virginia, but really it's throughout Central Appalachia to increase the productivity of their maple operations and to increase the profitability of their maple operations. So we work with them to increase both the output from the trees and then the value of the product that comes from that endeavor. In the process of that, we stick to the Future Generations basic mission of community change, and we're working to try to enrich life in rural Appalachia, one maple syrup producer at a time. And we've gone from about 13 producers in my time here and in this game to now well over 70 producers. We've seen a big increase both in awareness and in the income generating possibilities of maple syrup in the region. All right, let's just see where we're going to go with this. And all right, there we go. If anybody has any questions along the way, we're a nice small group. Feel free to ask them and we'll stop right there and address those. Okay. So here's one of my favorite quotes from Garnet Wetzel. Garnet was an old maple syrup producer in West Virginia of the older days, and he was noted for saying there are only two seasons in a year. There's maple season and there's getting ready for maple season. Now we just finished maple season, and those of you who make maple syrup out there who are listening to this will have your own opinions on what happened this season, how things went. Okay. And now as soon as you get done with that, a little bit of relaxed time, and bingo, it's time to start thinking about the next maple syrup season. I got a call today from Chris Grimes. He's only been done for about a month, and he says he already misses it. And he's out in the woods thinking about what he can do next year to make his operation better. And that's what people do during the off season. They dream about the next coming season. They forget about all the hard work that went into it in the last year. They dream about the next coming season, and they strategize and plan for how they can improve their operations. We're all innovators out there in the maple game. Nobody's got it right. We've been working on it for hundreds of years. Actually, this is the Native American art and science well before we arrived on the continent. And we're still working on increasing productivity, increasing profitability from our operations. Okay, garnet. That's where the topic of this presentation went. Okay, it came from. All right, 2024 maple season. We just finished it. Some of us out there are quote unquote crying in your beer. Okay. It was a tough year. Oh, I didn't get any production. That weather was too warm or the weather was too cold, depending on where you were. Why do I continue to do this? It's but by next season you're psyched up and ready to grow again. So the 2024 maple season for some in West Virginia was a crying in your beer season. Southern parts of the state, we had a warm period and basically shut the season off early. High elevation parts of the state stayed cold too long. The season never got going until late, and people are quote unquote crying in your beer. On the other hand, there are, okay, make it go. Let's see, back up. Some of us who are buying around it for the bar. Okay, we're happy. It's been a good year. Hey, let's celebrate. Share with our friends. And so it was a split season in West Virginia. Where I live in Pendleton County, eastern part of the state. Well, maybe halfway, not quite halfway, not downstate, but quite a ways off of the panhandles up north. And we had a wonderful season. Okay. And our producers in Pendleton County are happy as can be. They either are at previous good years productions or had record years. Randy Kimball, one of the guys that I work with most closely, he's never seen this much sap. Chris Grimes, another Pendleton County producer, unbelievable. He's had such a good year. So the season was either one way or the other. Either you were unhappy, crying in your beer, or we were celebrating by buying around at the bar, depending on where you were. Very much dependent on latitude, very much dependent on elevation. And Pendleton County, Franklin, West Virginia, we hit the sweet spot this year. We don't do it every year, but we certainly hit it this year. So the season's over. Remember, there was 2 seasons to the year, maple season and getting ready for maple season. And we're in the latter part now. We've cleaned up our equipment, pulled our taps, hopefully, or at least most of us, and taken a little bit of a rest, mowed the lawn, and now it's time to think, well, what can we do in 2025? And in fact, I'm in Weston, West Virginia today, right off Route 79, getting ready for the kickoff on the Getting Ready for Maple season. And that is the West Virginia Maple Syrup Producers Association's annual meeting, which is taking place Saturday in Weston. It's preceded by a workshop, and we always try to do a series of workshops. We call it Maple Madness. Okay, come on out, learn something, share, learn from your colleagues out there, and get yourself ready to start thinking about what's coming next. And what's coming next? Maple season 2025. So what we're going to talk tonight on is some research that we're doing at Future Generations University. I'm a research scientist. I'm a forest ecologist by training, a plant physiologist by avocation, and I'm involved in extension, maple extension, but also an awful lot of research at the institution. And we're gonna be talking about just a few of the strategies for getting to success. Okay, to getting to the point where you're gonna buy the round for the bar next year by taking steps now that position yourself for the season. All right, now we're West Virginia folks, West by God Virginians, right? And we we are a 3/16 state. You probably know about that. If not, you should know that there are two types of sap collection systems. There are 5/16 systems, and there are 3/16 systems. Most maple producers in North America run 5/16 systems. West Virginia runs 3/16. 80+% of our syrup is produced, and our producers, I'll say our producers, are running 3/16 systems. How come? Now there's a picture on the left of basically the 5/16, and you can see the 3/16 is a much narrower tube. Okay, well, why do we do this? Why did 3/16 make such a hit down here? And I was there when Tim Wilmot, the inventor of this thinner, smaller diameter tubing, came down. I called him the prophet of 3/16. He came down, completely changed the sap and syrup industry in West Virginia. Okay, there are advantages to 3/16 systems. One, you don't need a vacuum pump or a releaser to get vacuum. Now that may seem crazy. How do you get vacuum without a vacuum pump to pull the air out of your system? Well, you do it with slope and the natural tendency of water molecules to hold together and pull on each other. So we don't need a vacuum pump and a releaser. Vacuum pump's $5,000. Most of our producers are small. They couldn't do that. Okay. We don't need it because we got the advantage of 3/16 and that natural vacuum. Furthermore, we don't need any fossil fuels as an energy source. We don't need to be near a power pole in order to run a 3/16 system. We don't need a generator and a gas motor out in the woods like they do in Ohio on 5/16 systems, because it's a natural process. We're not having to artificially pump the air out of the tubing. And thirdly, it's less expensive. That bottom tubing, you can buy a 500-foot roll of that for just under $100. That top tubing, you can buy a 1,000-foot roll for just under $100, twice as much tubing. Or what that turns out to mean is half the expense in putting up a system. So West Virginia, we don't have a lot of power poles. We got a lot of back roads. Okay. 3/16 requires slope. We got a lot of slope. Man, the hills up here have elevation change to them. And we can do it much less expensively with 3/16. So that's why we are a 3/16 state. All right. But there's problems with these systems. Okay. And they came in and they were magic. They were miracles. And pretty soon people started to realize, well, nothing's for nothing. And by going to the smaller diameter, there are problems associated with it. One of which is clogging of the lines with a microbial mass of bacteria and fungi, clogging those lines, specifically at fittings that connect one tubing to another, fitting a T that connects a lateral line to a drop line that goes up to the tree. We'll see all these before we're done here. Okay, those restrict the flow even more. Now we restricted it quite a bit with 3/16. Now we're going to restrict it even more with these fittings, and they tend to clog up. Okay, the microbes in there, microbial mass tends to build up. We'll see this, and clogging is a problem. Okay, also these things were a miracle when they came in. First year, man, everybody doubled their sap production. Wonderful over gravity. Okay. But by the second and third year, it's starting to drop off a little bit. Okay, your production isn't nearly as good as it used to. And third, they're harder to leak check. You've got more trees on a line than you do in a 5/16 system, and they're harder to figure out where those leaks are. So we are a 3/16 state. There are other people who use it elsewhere too. I'll show you some of those. And our research at Future Generation is to some degree, or to a great degree, over the last couple of years, been addressing those problems of clogging, reduced to a sap yield, leak checking. And we've got studies that are trying to overcome some of these some of these problems that came with the systems that make so much sense in our mountain state. All right, 5/16 systems, bigger diameter pipes, vacuum pumps, releasers. They've been using these, well, since the early 70s, okay? 70, 80, 90, 2000, you got 40 plus years, maybe 50 years of experience in the woods with a 5/16 system. We've got, 10 if we're lucky. And the Proctor Maple Research Center and Cornell University, which are both in New York, have been researching these systems for a long time. And here's a paper that's on mapleresearch.org. It's titled "A Decade of Spout and Tubing Sanitation Research Summarized." So these guys have been at this for a long time, trying to figure out how to make their 5/16 systems works better, increase productivity, increase profitability. And we're just new babes in the woods. We're just starting this game. So this is the organization that Lindsay and I and Martha and Casey work for. It's called Future Generations University. It's a worldwide organization. I like to tell my Maple friends that we are the only Maple research organization with an office in Kathmandu, Nepal, and another one in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And they look at me like cross-eyed, like I'm crazy or something. And that could be true too. We won't discount that. But there's a worldwide organization, and part of that organization is a community change organization with a mission to increase livelihoods for people who will then enhance their communities. Part of that is our community in West Virginia. And so the Appalachian program, which we all work for, was formed and moved forward to do what we're doing internationally to our own communities in West Virginia. So that's Future Generations, and we all put our boots on and show up there and work together to work with Appalachian communities. All right. We do not, unlike Proctor and Cornell, the two major research centers in New York. Proctor is actually in Vermont. Cornell is obviously in New York. We don't have a research forest that we can try things out on. What we do at Future Generations, we take a little different approach to our research. We work with collaborating producers. So we work with a producer to experiment and try different things. It's got to be a collaboration. Not all experiments are successful, but we work on trying to find ways to help the producers increase their production. And the producer, in terms, helps us gather the data that's necessary to that they found that is successful. So we're in Pendleton County down here, and we have a farm not far from us in Pendleton, and that's Kimball's Maple Farm. And we work, and we're going to see some results of some research at Kimball's Maple Farm. We got a lot of things going on there. We're going to focus tonight pretty much strictly on sanitation studies. And we've just began a collaboration, literally just this last week, with Saphound Maple up in Maine. Okay. Most of our producers in West Virginia are small producers. They've got anywhere from 500 taps to 5,000 taps. Saphound Maple up in Maine is a 3/16 producer, although most people don't use it up there. The St. Ange folks up there really like it. St. Xavier folks, Corey and Nathan and Albert, they really like their 3/16 tubing, but they've got 16,000 taps on their operation, and they're expanding. Okay, and they need some answers to some of these problems, just like our guys down here in West Virginia. So we're in Pendleton County, but I got a collaborator in northern Maine. Okay, and I got a collaborator right around the corner that we work with to conduct our research and try to find answers to some of the problems, the decreased production, and particularly the decreased production and the clogging problems in our tubing. All right, so we're we're gonna focus the rest of this. Now, there are many different strategies being developed to make sap and syrup production work in our area. And we could go in many different directions. So we could take, many nights to do it. We're not going to do that. Okay. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to talk specifically about research that we've been doing at Future Generations to address those problems. And we said we had a collaborating researcher at Randy Kimball's maple farm. And this is the study that we have set up at Randy's operation. Okay. And again, it's a collaboration. Randy gathers data for us, and in turn, we basically help him to increase his production. And I will say this year, using some of the techniques that we've integrated into his system, he had the best year ever. He had a bumper year of sap production at Kimball's maple farm. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at a map or an air photo on the left-hand side. And between where all those dots are, yellow, green, white, up on a plateau, and we've got 207 plus feet, about 207 feet of elevation change. See the dark on there? That's basically a shadow, okay, sun shadow in there, down to his farm and collection site down below. So we've got lots of drop. Now, this is not a talk on 3/16. We could do that another time too. In order to get maximum vacuum on 3/16, and those of you who do it know that this is true, you need a 50-foot elevation change, a drop of 50 feet. We got 200 feet. So we are maximizing the vacuum development and the sap flow from all those trees on that plateau up top. All right, we've got 6 different lines. We got a green line, an orange line, a red line, a white line, a yellow line, and a pink line. And we're going to follow the sap flow in those lines over 2-year period now. They all run down the hill, and then on the right-hand side, they all run each one into its own collection tank. So each of those have their own collection tank. And as I said, Randy helps us gather data. He goes out and he measures the amount of sap in each of those tanks. I won't say every day, but periodically, okay? And we get a flow on that. Now I want you to if you look closely, and then when he empties them, he dumps them into this larger tote, this larger plastic tote. But he doesn't do that until we have volume measurements coming down off of those 6 lines. And now if you look really closely, you can see that the level of sap in all those 6 tanks, those are 55-gallon drums, the level is all really close to the same, okay? It's really close to the same. We tried to balance these lines up here so that it would give us similar sap flow from each line. Now I'll show you what we had to do that, okay? We know that sap flow is positively correlated to the tree crown size. Bigger the tree crown, the more leaves, the more photosynthesis, the more sugar, the more sap. Okay, that should all kind of make sense. That's logic. Tree crown, now measuring tree crowns, that's difficult. Okay, how big does this tree go and where does the other one? Tree crown size is positively correlated to tree diameter. So that makes sense too. You got a bigger diameter tree, okay, i.e. a bigger bowl, a bigger log on the bottom of it, you're going to have a bigger crown because it can support more branches. So in 2023, as we were setting up this research area, we tried to make those number of trees and the diameter, and then a third metric called basal area. You don't have to worry about that. If you're a forester, you know what I'm talking about there. All similar for all 6 lines. So if we take a look at that, look at the average, they're in yellow on the bottom here. Okay, my green line, 11.1 inch diameter. When you average them, orange line, 11.1, that's pretty close. Red line, 11.0. That's 1/10 of an inch different. White line, 10.8 or 3/10. 11.1, 11.0. So those lines are really similar in terms of their trees, in terms of the size of the trees, in terms of the crowns of the trees, in terms of the trees. And to get these basal areas particularly, each of those lines has over here on the left-hand side is the number of trees. They've got 10 or some of them have 11 trees to get us to those numbers that are similar. As again, don't worry about the BA basal area, but we wanted those numbers to be similar as well. Had to add a few more trees to those, just one, in order to come up with that. So you could see on the last picture, you could see the sap collection was pretty darn similar. Okay, we'll go back and look at that again. All of it, you can see it in there very lightly. And then if you look at the trees, okay, pretty darn similar. So that first year, every year, basically, anytime we want to work here, we know we've got 6 similar lines that the sap flow is not different strictly due to differences in trees. All the big line trees are on this line, all the little trees are on this line. Okay. No. We worked very hard to develop a system where they were balanced. All right. So in 2023, okay, we went out there in 2023 and we measured sap flow in that season. And 2023 was a poor season for us. And you'll see that when I go to 2024. Okay. We only had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sap runs in 2023. It takes about 13, more than 10 to 15 good sap runs to have a good maple season. We had 5. It's a terrible year in Pendleton County. We weren't in the sweet spot. All right, and we can take a look at those 6 lines. And trees are as different from each other as people are different. I like to say, trees are just like people. Some are sweet and some are not. I mean, some are just grouches and some are, you can get along with real well. And trees are the same thing here. So that first year, okay, we had an average of 55 gallons of sap per line. And if you keep that in mind, keep that 55 in mind, because if we look at the orange line, it was 5% over average, but only 2 gallons. Okay. 55 and 57 is pretty close. The green line was 50, 8% below. The red line, 25% low. You'll have to ask the trees what's going on there. All I know is that line does not produce as much. Okay. 53, almost the same. Pink line, 23. Oh, no. Yeah. Okay. 60, red line is 68, 25% more. The pink line was 23% less, 42 and 55. And the yellow one, I want to keep your eyes on the yellow one. Okay. The yellow line was just about average, 55 gallons on the season. It had 57, 5% over average, but pretty darn similar. Okay. Now we're going to look at and the first year, the 2023, all these lines were all new. They were all brand new and they were all treated exactly the same. There basically was no treatment. They were all new lines. Okay. Next year, 2024, let's take a look at what we had here. Look up on the top. Orange and green were new. That means that we took the old lines out and put brand new sap lines in. Okay. Red and white were sanitized. That means we didn't take them out, but we did a treatment, a sanitation treatment to basically reduce the microbes in those. Remember, the sanitation, when you're sanitizing something, you're trying to get rid of microorganisms. And we're going to take a look at the micro side of this in just a little bit. So they're sanitized, and the unsanitized lines were the pink and the yellow. Remember, yellow was 5% over average last year. These two, the microbial buildup in those lines was not, we didn't try to get rid of it like we did in the sanitized lines. And certainly there would be no buildup in the new line. So now let's take a look at this season. January 26th to February. Look at how many we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Hey, 10 to 15. That's a good season, right? And here we had 14 good sap runs, meaning times that we had so much sap in those containers that Randy had to go and empty them. Okay. He measured them when he emptied them. Our orange and green were new. Our red and white were sanitized. Our pink and yellow, keep your eye on that yellow, were unsanitized. Let's see what we got out of this. Okay. Season average, if you averaged them all up, was 229 gallons of sap. Okay, per line. The year before was 55. Here we are 225. Basically almost 4 times as much sap this year as we had last year. If we look at the new lines, taking that average, the new line, okay, the orange and the green was 36 and 33% above average, okay? Remember last year they were all new, okay? But now some of them are new, and the variation, you're going to see much more variation because they had different treatments. Sanitized lines was 40% and 11% above average, okay? Unsanitized lines was 47% and 73% below average. Hold it, this sanitation here just might have a benefit, right? Take a look at the averages on the, as you move down here on the left-hand side. The season mean is 229. The new lines, and we know that new lines are perfectly sanitary and they're great, 309 gallons of sap on averaging out those two new lines. The sanitized lines, 288. Well, that's not 309, but it's a whole lot better than 92. Okay. Wow, what a difference here. So what we showed with our sap flow information from this year is that, hey, if you want to increase production, you got to sanitize your lines. I mean, you can double unsanitized 92, okay, sanitized 288. Holy mackerel, you can more than double your sap collected from those lines by a sanitation process. Okay. All right. So that's cool. That's part of what we've been doing in the last 2 years is we've been saying, okay, does this thing work? I don't want to go out and tell a maple syrup producer to go and do something unless I can tell them it can work. I can tell them this is going to work. I'll show them the data at this point and say, you know, you're kind of crazy not to sanitize at this point. It just makes so much sense. All right. Now we back this up last year and this year with research on the microbes in those sap lines. Okay. We not only had the sap flow, and we had no idea it was going to come out that dramatically, but we also wanted to see what exactly is growing in those lines. And in order to do this, we partnered with some colleagues at West Virginia State University down out of Charleston, okay? And WV State is a state land grant, 4-year plus university in West Virginia. And we worked with their food science laboratory there. And that lady in the left is our #1 food scientist, Yangjing Young, Dr. Yangjing Young. And we actually got Dr. Young out of the lab on the right and out in the woods tapping trees so that she could see exactly, you know, what this maple business we're talking about, what it is, okay? And when we were out collecting sap, she was out each week. We'd send samples down to her, analyzing the microbial mass in those tubing. All right, so what is this microbial analysis? What are we talking about? We're talking about bacteria. All right. We're talking about yeasts and we're talking about mold. Yeasts and mold are fungal organisms, okay? Bacteria are not fungal organisms. I mean, I'm not even sure what. Anyhow, they're not fungal organisms, okay? They're another critter out there. Mold we often see on the top of maple syrup, jar maple syrup that's not processed properly. Yeasts we often see in the sap coming on in, and we'll talk more about that. But these critters are what was growing on the insides of the tubes and in the sap. All right, these are specific microorganisms recovered from, and there's, hundreds, maybe thousands of different types of microorganisms. Look at that last look at the fur balls on that last petri dish here, and all the different colors and types of things there, okay? And then we've got a middle one, and Yang Jin was growing basically microbes. These are some of them she found from sap samples and tubing samples that we sent down to her lab, and he was monitoring them because you can't measure each individual, all these thousands of different types of critters. She put them in used standard classifications, and she was counting what she called CFU, colony forming units. So if you look at the right-hand side, each one of those dots is a colony forming unit, okay? And so she's growing these things, she's counting them, and she's doing this each week during the sap flow season from basically the sap itself, and then also from the insides of the tubing. All right. So why? Who cares about these things? Well, these are different types of bacteria, molds, and yeast, and they cause defects. They cause us problems. They reduce sap yield. We showed that with our reductions in sap yield from our unsanitized lines. They cause ropey sap and also ropey syrup. It's a defect problem. Okay. They're responsible somewhat for buddy sap, end of the season, reduce sap yield, reduce each of these different individual types of critters. Now we're at the individual level, has some deleterious effect on our operation. So they're not nice. We just soon not have them there, right? Buddy sap, a combination of microbial accumulation and metabolic changes in the tree at the end of the sugar season. Okay. Ropey sap, a second common maple and syrup defect, stringiness. Okay. Exopolysaccharide producing bacteria, contaminants responsible for the defect. Okay. Sour sap, another problem we end up with in our sap and our syrup. Acid formed from microbial hydrolysis, breaking down of sucrose into glucose and fructose. Okay, sour sap. Red sap caused by another thing. Milky sap. Many of you, if you're a maple syrup producer, you've had times when you've got milky sap, excessive yeast growth. Yeast causes that milky, and often there's white particulate matter in there. So these are all some of the, not only first slide we looked at some of the individual organisms. Now here we're looking at some of the problems that they caused. All right. So microbial buildup. Here's where we end up isolating those problems. It's a problem at the tap hole. Okay, that's a problem at the tap hole, contamination at the tap hole. And this is a problem because that contamination causes the tree to react, okay, to the contamination, and it basically shuts off the flow of sap. It's just like if you get cut and you get an infection, your body reacts against that infection, sends white blood cells to that site, and to kill or eliminate the microbes. In your case, it's bacteria, and the same thing is happening with the tree. The trees, participant in this game. It's a live organism, and it wants to isolate the problem. So there's a problem. There's a T. We said there's a drop line coming down to a lateral line, goes from tree to tree. Those T's clog, okay? So we got microbial contamination shortening the sap season. We got clogging of those T's. And finally, this what's called a biofilm, or basically the growth of microbes throughout the sap line, okay, that contribute to contamination of the sap as it flows down here and contribute to the deleterious effects here. So we got some problems, and we gotta come up with solutions to address those problems to keep our productivity high. Okay, the sanitation method that we at Future Generations have been using, we refer to as the Kruger method. We've had out of the woods seminars on the Kruger method. They're all recorded, okay? We've written, I have, to the articles for the Maple News and Maple Syrup Digest on the Kruger method. Arthur Kruger lived in Vermont, and he came up with a method, a way of sanitizing sap lines that he claimed did not resulted in without not having a drop in productivity from his lines. And we got into the game with Arthur because we wanted to say, well, that's what you think, Arthur, but we better put some numbers to this. We got to do some science here and find out if that is in fact true. All right, we're sanitizing with a calcium bleach. The bleach you use with your laundry is sodium hypochlorite. We're using calcium hypochlorite. We're using a calcium bleach instead of a sodium bleach. The reason is the degradation product from sodium hypochlorite is salt, sodium chloride. And you know, those little furry guys out there just love to chew up sap lines so they can lick that salt. The degradation of calcium hypochlorite obviously is not salt. It's a calcium product. It technically is a salt, but it's not salt, not table salt, okay? So that's what we're using, and you can go in and we take a whole other session to get into the intricacies of the Kruger method. We're going to move by it. This is the method we're using. It's available, a resource through Lindsay's site here, okay? And here's the red line. We went back to different colored lines, but the red line is a sanitized line of our 6 lines. Red dot, those are red trees. Look at those lines. They are clean. They're clear as can be, okay? It was the first year they were new. The second year, the red line and the white line were treated with this sanitizing agent, okay? We had treated, we had new, and we had untreated. And the untreated, okay, was the yellow line and the pink line. And here's the yellow line. This is unsanitized. Whoa, you can see the difference there, can't you? Between that looking to be perfectly clean line, just almost like new, and this line here that was unsanitized. And here's a T. You can see the problem that can occur with the reduced restriction in there, okay, with this stuff basically lodging in that restriction, causing a clogging. And you can see the buildup throughout the line here, which is the biofilm on the inside of that line. This is extreme, okay, but why not take a photograph of the extreme? This is what it looked like at the end of the second year without any sanitation treatment. So you can start to see that this kind of makes sense with the flows we're looking at. Now, remember I said Yang Jin got samples every week, okay? And she analyzed those samples for different groupings of bacteria. She analyzed for a particular bacteria group called Pseudomonas, okay? And it's a constituent of the biofilm. Remember that film on the inside of that tube? There's a lot of Pseudomonas there, okay? And there are many, many, many individual species of Pseudomonas. She analyzed for psychotropic bacteria. These are bacteria that grow at really low temperatures, okay? These are the things that will cause things to go be contaminated or go bad even in your refrigerator. All right, so they're really, really low temperatures. And she analyzed for mold and yeast. So two different bacteria, mold and yeast, causing the fermentation and the sour sap. Now, one of the things that producers, we always work with producers, what are the questions they want to answer? Okay. They need to know how long they can hold on to their sap before it's been so contaminated, it's problematic. Now, mold and yeast is just the most extreme of this. Those slopes of those lines are steeper than the other two, but it pretty much holds true for the other two, okay? And what was supposed to be in this slide, and I have no idea what it wasn't, but we could talk about, that another day. There's supposed to be a chart here that tells us what the temperatures of these three different lines are, okay? I know that the upper line, okay, the one we're looking at here with the squares was just over 40, probably 47 degrees Fahrenheit. 50-degree Fahrenheit is kind of like a magic number. If you get over that, things just go wild in your sugar bush. This was almost at that point. Your refrigerator is supposed to be at 40 degrees centigrade, just below that point, okay? And then I know that the one here on the bottom line, and that we should have little circles on it. I don't have the legend here, but I know that that's oh golly, 30 in the 30s, okay? So that's it, that's in the 30s, just above freezing. 10 degrees Celsius if you want to do that conversion, okay? So that's down there, probably 37 or 38 degrees, something like that. And if you look, okay, look at this is the log, and we'll talk about log scales here in a minute. But this is the number of colony forming units, and it peaks out right about here at almost 6.5 logarithmic scale in about a day and a half at 47 degrees. So if it's at 47 degrees, you got about a day and a half before that sap is pretty bad. If you keep it colder, the 30s, you can go up to 5 days of holding that sap. By the time to get that same 6.5 level, you got all the way out here to almost 120 hours, which is 5 days in order to get to that point. So one thing we can say for sure is the cooler you keep your sap, the longer you can keep your sap. If you let it warm up, it's going to be gone. The microbes are going to take over and ruin it within a day and a half. Okay, so we looked at that temperature's effect on microbial growth in these lines, and we looked at some images here of different samples of mold and yeast from 5 different samples, and then the blue line is the unsanitized. And then we looked at Pseudomonas. Okay, that was mold and yeast. And the blue was the unsent. Then we looked at psychotropic over the course of the season, 1 to 5 weeks on the season. And bang, there was that. Okay. So we can see that the unsanitized, which is a scanning electron microscope picture of those blue bars. The unsanitized is pretty rough. If you look at the interior, this is the interior of the sap line, the interior of that tube, and the bottom is the sanitized, okay? Well, the sanitized looks pretty smooth, like you would expect the inside of a plastic tube to look, but the unsanitized has got a lot of irregularities in there as the biofilm, the microbial mass, builds up, and as it builds up, it breaks off and contaminates the sap as well as the inside of those lines. All right, so we're learning things about the microbial mass in these lines. We layered that on top of the information we gathered on sap flow. Okay, one final graph here. Okay, and this is again 5 weeks of the 2023 season, and the bottom line is the blue is is the new line, and the top, the red, is a 1-year-old line. We've got a 1-year-old line and a new line. And the scale on here is a logarithmic scale. So each unit in that scale is 10 times more than the unit before it. So if 3, I'm just going to make this up, was 10, 4 would be 100, 5 would be 1,000, 6 would be 10,000, 100,000, and 1,000,000. Okay. So in order to stop this graph from going from here to the ceiling, we use a log scale in order to bring it in line. The thing to see here is that starting out, okay, both of these lines, even though they look to be about the same distance apart, are pretty close. 3.97 log CFU per milliliter and 3.32 log CFU per milliliter. What does that come down to? It comes down to 2,000 colony forming units per milliliter, or 9,000 colony forming units per milliliter. Okay, that's still quite a bit of difference. But by the time you get up here, 5 weeks later, we're looking at 6 and 7, and the difference here is 4,265,795, or 26 million colony forming units. Whoa, 5 weeks later, those tubes had 26 million units, little dots per milliliter. Okay. And the new line, sanitized line, is almost as good as the new line, only at 4 million. 4 million's a lot, but it's a heck of a lot less than 26 million. So you can see, again, the impact of either being new or sanitizing on reduction of the colony forming units, and how it holds and is still quite a bit lower as you move to the end of the season. All right, so the last little, and we're just about done with our time here too, I can see. Our last little experiment that we worked on this year is we looked at sanitizing spouts, the piece you put in the tree. Remember we said that you know the spouts and the contamination of the spouts helps the tree heal. Basically, doesn't help it heal, it cuts off the sap flow. Okay, and here's a picture of the sanitized and the unsanitized, but I can't see on mine up here. But let's see how we did this. Okay, so how we sanitize them is we used nylon spouts, okay, and we put the spout in what's called a steri cap. So we put the sanitizing solution through the spout and then inserted it into this cap, and allowed that cap and the sanitizing solution, allowed the spout to bathe in that sanitizing solution for a period of time. That's another whole story there, but a period of time. Turns out the period of time is like 15 minutes, not a big deal. And here's what we found out, okay? And this to me was really cool. Pseudomonas on the left, mold and yeast in the middle, psychotropic bacteria on the right. Those that were sanitized, okay, the blue and the green, were below the detectable limit. The detectable limit was 1.7 log CFU per spout, and they were below that limit, meaning that she didn't see anything on these, as opposed to the unsanitized, which should be red here. And you can see that those unsanitized spouts, again, logarithmic scale there, is quite a bit higher. Now, and these are new spouts, and they're sanitized spouts. So the 5/16 people at this point, they've settled on a strategy of replacing their spouts every year. We've shown here that if you properly sanitize them, it's as good as a new spout, or very close to it. And that saves a lot of money. It saves a lot of environmental waste. It saves a lot of time. So we've learned again through these little experiments that we're conducting that this is a good thing to do. Now I'm going to go back and look at that very first one of the first slides again. Then we'll finish this up in just a few minutes, because with what we know right now, I want to go back and take a look at this right here. Look at the pink and the yellow lines, okay, and see how they at least the pink started out pretty darn good. Okay, the yellow did not. All right, it was not too good, but the pink quickly dropped on down. The yellow also dropped on down, but and this one, for some reason, this data only collected from one line. They both quit. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 or 4. The last 2 or 4 sap runs. While these other trees were still producing, the unsanitized lines had stopped producing. The amount produced by those lines had gone down as the season went on, but they quit early, okay? So by sanitizing, you not only keep your production up during the season, you lengthen the season, which means less contaminated sap is getting into the tree to cause the tree reaction to seal off the tap hole. All right, so now we're going to go back and do one more thing, then we'll open it for questions. All right, so where are we going with this now? We now know that sanitation with calcium hypochlorite basically increases sap flow, without a doubt, keeps it very close to new lines. We know that if you sanitize your spouts, you don't have to replace them, okay? And you also don't have to replace the drops. The 5/16 guys replace drops every 3 to 5 years, don't have to do it. That they replace spouts every year, don't have to do it, okay? What we need to do now is come up with a sanitizing process. We got the Kruger method, okay? But we've got some data here that can improve that Kruger method. And we've just began this relationship with this guy in Maine, Saphound Maple, and we're working with him to develop a strategy that's doable. What can a maple, we can come up with wonderful ideas in the lab, but what's doable in the field? What can a producer actually do? And we're also doing some financial analysis to say, well, okay, sanitizing takes extra time. You're going to spend more time in the woods. Time is money, but you don't have to replace your drops. You don't have to replace your spouts. You start thinking about you don't have the tippage fees at the dump or the environmental impact of all this plastic being thrown away. So what the finances are to the producer and what's a doable system. And so we're working with basically Nathan and Corey St. Xavier up in Maine, and we're going to be developing a strategy, sanitation strategy, in which to basically embed the research that we've been doing and come up with a way for our 3/16 people to reduce clogging, check that one off, and reduce the reduction in sap flow from lines during the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th years of their operation. All right, so that's what I do. I go out and measure the amount of sap coming off of those hills, set up experiments, design experiments that are going to do that, send samples down, Yang Jin analyzes them, and we put all the things together and come up with improved strategies for our Central Appalachian maple producers to become more profitable and more productive. All right. So with that, I'm going to say it's 8 o'clock, and I'm going to say I'm kind of tired of talking. So it's up to you. If you have some questions, shoot. Okay. Somehow they'll get to me and we'll answer them. You got any questions? Anything else? Doesn't have anything to do with this. I'll be glad to chat with you on anything related to maple at this point. So we'll stop screen share and let it go from here. Okay, Lynn, she's all yours.
Thank you, Mike. That was an amazing presentation. Super interesting. We are having some technical difficulties with the chat feature. So if you have questions, please go ahead and put those in the Q&A. We do have a question from Dick and Gail. They would like to know, have you used isopropyl as a sanitizer?
Dick and Gail, that is an excellent question. And I would use isopropyl in a heartbeat if it was legal. Okay. In the United States, and you figure this one out, it is not legal to use isopropyl alcohol to sanitize saplings. In Canada, everybody does it. Over half of our syrup on Walmart shelves comes from Canada. That seems to be okay, but it has to be registered as a sanitizing agent for saplines with the Environmental Protection Agency, and it ain't, and we can't use it legally. Does it happen? That's another discussion, but we can't use it legally in this country. By the way, we're trying to do something about that. Anybody want to tell me about your season this year?
You would like to share about your season, you can go ahead and raise your hand and I can unmute you so that you can talk live on screen.
By the way, I'll just mention for folks that are, still engaged here a little bit. We feel that our Central Appalachian region is on the forefront of issues related to climate change in the maple industry. That as our climate becomes less predictable and warmer, that it's going to cause more of these microbial problems. And the work that we're doing here, I'm convinced is going to be of great use to our maple syrup producing friends up north. In fact, in 2 weeks, I'll be heading out to Portland, Oregon, and the University of Washington, just outside of Seattle. And they want me to come out there and tell them what we're doing in West Virginia and Central Appalachia to get around some of these problems. They're tapping big leaf maple out there, which is really interesting. And they have some of the same climate variable issues that we're facing here. And of course, our solution to that is to try to knock down those microbial counts as we go.
Mike, we have another question in the Q&A. Is peroxide as a sanitizer okay?
Peroxide is okay. Yes, it is. Yep. I mentioned the 10 years of sanitation research done by Procter and Cornell, Procter Maple Research Center in Cornell. They tested on 5/16 tubing. They tested alcohol, they tested peroxide, they tested bleach. They went through a whole series. Of course, it took them 10 years to do it, of different experiments with different things. They did, I will say, if you go and read that paper, you'll see that peroxide is perfectly fine. It's not as good as bleach. That bleach, either calcium or sodium, calcium bleach is what we're using. Bleach is more effective than the peroxide.
Awesome, thank you. Dick and Gail added that they had their second best season in the last 7 years, and I believe we have Mr. Paul Ronk on to give us an update on his season.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Paul.
I'm looking forward to seeing everybody tomorrow on Saturday.
I've invited them all to the meeting.
Very much so. Well, it was kind of tough here this year, but it was better than last year, but not a whole lot better. I only had about 5 collections total. But one thing I have not done is sanitize my lines. And today's presentation was point on. There's no doubt about that. Now, my question also, though, is if you're using a diaphragm pump, do you still need to sanitize?
Paul, that is a good question. I don't have a definitive answer, okay? Because I've never sanitized with a diaphragm pump. My guess is yes. And I think what you're going to find is that a diaphragm pump increases sap flow without a doubt. We're gonna learn about that tomorrow in our workshops. And sanitation increases sap flow. And if you put the two of them together, you may really be somewhere. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
The guys who are talking tomorrow all sanitize.
Yep, sounds great. Hope everybody's going to be there.
There, Lindsay just put the information
Yes,
up.
I
Wonderful.
just added the annual meeting information link to the chat for anyone interested. And Mike, we have Gordon who also has come online to talk about his season as well, I believe.
Wonderful.
Hi, Mike. I'm from Ohio, northeast Ohio, and I had a particularly poor season and also had some lines dry up on me, some main lines
Yeah.
early. I did start sanitizing last year, but this year I used calcium chloride and I pushed it up and down all of my 29 main lines. And also I pushed it out so that when I pulled a tap, I let it come out and all the way up and out the drop.
Great.
I remove my spiles every year and I close that loop on the drop so that it holds that liquid.
Okay.
So everything's sitting out there saturated right now. I haven't run vacuum to pull it all back out of the lines yet. So that it gets maximum amount of exposure to the lines. A few of the main lines that I have run vacuum, I got a lot of bad stuff out.
Yeah, I bet. You must know my good friend Les Ober.
Oh yeah, Les. Yes, I do.
I will be with Les tomorrow.
Oh, you will.
He's coming over and he's helping judge our West Virginia contest. But I work with Les all the time.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah. So Les will tell you we had pretty poor season.
Yes. He didn't even bother tapping this year.
He didn't?
He did not.
Well, he was smart. It was very frustrating. But I was wondering, how did those 3/16 lines get sanitized? The 2 lines that were sanitized.
Okay.
How was that done?
Yeah, what we did is we don't have a main line on this, okay? We went up to the last tap, okay, and we used a backpack pump, little backpack sprayer, and basically put the fluid into that line, and then went down each line and opened up a spout until we had the sanitizing solution coming out of that spout, sealed it back off. Now, I'll tell you this is interesting for you, Gordon. You should not leave that solution in for long periods of time. The Kruger method, as Arthur devised it, was to leave it in all summer, and we found that the sanitizing agent loses its efficacy and microbes grow back in. And so we found this out working with saphound maple. You want to sanitize, you want to drain it, and if you can, you want to flush them.
Flush it. Okay.
Yeah. Our Arthur did it all from down. He pumped it all up the hill. Now you're in Ohio, you don't have the hills we've got. You could do that. We have to go from the top because we don't have big enough pumps to take our elevation into account.
Well, my pumping pumps didn't work either until I added air. I added compressed air, and what I found this year is I could go everywhere. Up 200 feet I could go.
Wow.
And I could still get good water flow, and it would spit out. And after you took the drop off the tree, it was whapping all around. You had to be careful not to get it all over you.
Yeah.
It was
Hey, so
make a mess.
just when I opened this thing up saying we're all learning in this game, okay? And the fun thing is I just learned something right now. All right. That's you and I got to keep talking about that, Gordon.
I was really surprised how effective it was. I got real good water flow, and I used a lot less water than I've used in the past, just rinsing the main lines by adding air. Because
I would like you to somehow get to Lindsay with your contact information. You and I got to follow this one up. You just come up with something I want to know about.
Well, so I'm excited about what might happen next year. Maybe things will improve.
Yeah, let's hope so. But you guys did have a bad season. I know you did.
Yeah, we did. But thanks for the tip. I will flush and rinse.
Yes.
I was also told that it would be helpful to dry out the lines, and
Yes.
I can't do that. Too many bugs get in there.
Yeah. Everybody's different in that respect. Our friends up in Maine just leave their spouts hang all summer long, and they don't have a problem. So everybody.
Yeah, that amazes me. I can't do that. Oh.
Yeah.
Right.
Not
Thank
very
you,
good.
Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, Gordon, make sure get Lindsay your contact. However you can do that, Lindsay. I'd like to keep in touch with Gordon there.
I will.
I will. Perfect. So Mike, we have a few more questions here that I want to make sure we get to before we leave this evening.
Sure.
So we have a question circling back to the peroxide being used, that would peroxide be more expensive to use as a sanitizer?
I don't have an answer because I've never tried it. I know calcium hypochlorite pool shock's pretty darn cheap, but I also know that if we can use Gordon's trick there and use air as well as solution and reduce the amount, that's a good thing. So we got to keep working on this the system that we're going to embed this into. Yeah, I don't know about peroxide. I've never used it.
Perfect. And is bleach considered a carcinogenic?
I wouldn't drink it. It is an approved calcium hypochlorite is an approved sanitizing solution, as is isopropyl. Well, isopropyl is not for sap lines, which drives me nuts too, because all during the pandemic, what did they say? Put on hand sanitizer. That's isopropyl alcohol. Put it on your hands, but don't put it in your sap lines. This is nuts. But
Absolutely
anyhow,
fair.
yeah, I mean, I think anything is carcinogenic if you drink too much of it.
So we have another question here, Mike, from Dave Carlin from Minnesota. He says hello and thank you for everything. He wants to know, did you fill the line full or did you just put in so many milliliters of the solution?
Good question. With the Canadian isopropyl alcohol on 5/16 lines, they just put in 15 milliliters into the drop line. We fill the lines, okay? And that's because we've got to not only sanitize the lines, but we also got that clogging problem. You fill it and drain it, you under pressure, you blow out all of that. As Gordon said, you got a lot of snotty stuff out of there. So we filled the lines. You couldn't afford to do that with isopropyl, but you can with the calcium bleach.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike.
And good to see Minnesota here. That's fun. Nice country up there.
So we actually have another comment here from Dick and Gail. They have a unit that mixes air and water to pump uphill as well, and that works well. And they are actually in Canada.
Ooh, okay. Well, say hi to my Quebecois friends up there. I'm in touch with them on their isopropyl process quite often. Cool. I would like to know about that. Okay, that's a new trick to me, and I sure would like to learn about it. Where in Canada, Dick and Gail?
I was just talking to them earlier and I can't remember off the top of my
Okay.
head.
That's no problem.
I want to say Ontario. Well, it is Ontario. Yes,
Okay.
Ontario.
Okay, good.
Okay. Well, I'll give everyone a few extra moments to put any last minute questions for Mike in the Q&A or the chat box. I do want to remind everyone that I have put some links in the chat. One is to our nature-based YouTube channel where you can find previous recordings of Out of the Woods, as well as some specialty episodes of material that we have on how to make walnut syrup, how to harvest walnuts, and some really cool forest farming videos and educational material that you can find there as well. There is also a link to the West Virginia Maple Syrup Producers Association annual meeting, information about that and how to register, as well as the agenda. And Future Generations University is holding value-added workshops across the state of West Virginia in many different locations, and there are multiple workshops that are happening. So if you are interested in getting the recipe in your head onto store shelves, this is a great opportunity to help walk you through that process, and you can find more information at the link in the chat as well. Our next Out of the Woods webinar will be on Thursday, May 16th. So we look forward to seeing everyone back here again. A special thank you to Margaret and Casey, and especially to our speaker this evening, Dr. Mike Rechlin. It was a wonderful evening with everyone. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to seeing you all again next month.
Thank you, Lindsay. Always good fun.